So welcome class to video 22, Habit 6, Synergize, Part 1, also called Principles of Creative Cooperation. So Covey says that synergy is the highest activity in all life, and that we create new alternatives by synergy. We work with someone else, we come up with a new solution we hadn't yet thought of. Synergy means the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So 2 plus 2 is not 4, but 6, 8, or more. So when we work together, we can accomplish more than if you and I were to work alone and then add that together. So we learn to value differences using synergy, to respect them, and to build on strengths, to compensate for weaknesses. So that brings us to seeing this in nature. It's called synergistic geese. Have you ever seen geese flying in a V formation? Why is one leg of the V longer than the other? Because there are more geese in it, intelligence test. But just kidding, let's go on to why I call them synergistic geese.
Did you know that if goose fly in a V formation, they can fly 71% farther than if each goose were to fly alone? When the leader gets tired, he will fall back in formation and regenerate, while another goose will take the lead position. If you see one formation in the sky, you can hear the goose honk when they fly over you in formation. What you hear are the goose in the back of the formation encouraging the leader. And if one goose gets tired and falls out of the formation, the whole flock will stop and help. That is synergy. Synergy happens when 2 plus 2 equals 22, or 100, or 1 million. You name it. Yeah, I know, mathematically this isn't possible, but human-wise it is. Synergy means that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Just think of two persons wandering through one of these huge cornfields where the corn grows so high that you cannot see anything, and none of them is tall enough to look over the corn and locate the exit. On their own, no one can get out. But if one guy lifts up the other, he can see the next exit and both can get out. Another example would be if the government keeps all of the money and the resources so that the population is starving. If you go to the government and say, hey, I'm pissed, give me some food, they will kill you. And they will also kill the guy that comes the next day, and so on. But if a whole nation works together, they can kill every leader of the country and bring the whole government down. Just think of the French Revolution, or almost any revolution. Together, you can achieve more than anyone can on his own. A last example would be Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. It is not very likely that they could have changed the world on their own. But with a few people and teams in their businesses, they created things like Windows and smartphones. Think of a world without these. And also imagine a Bill Gates walking around in the city selling Windows on his own with a Windows tray. Not very effective. But keep in mind that there is also negative synergy. Negative synergy is when 2 plus 2 equals 3, or 1, or even 0. An example would be if co-workers only talk to each other instead of doing their work. If they would be alone, they couldn't talk to each other, so it would be more likely that they do their work. And another example could be if you want to build a tree house with your friend, but instead of building it, you would fight all the time about the color of the house. A great sentence that describes synergy is, none of us is as smart as all of us. So try to avoid a situation when there is only negative synergy, and look for opportunities in your life where you can make use of Habit 6 and synergize with others. This was my video on Habit 6, Synergize. Click here to watch my video on Habit 7, Sharpen the Saw.
Okay, we'll get to Habit 7 later. So in synergy, we can learn to use what's called synergistic communication. And when we engage in that, we have mutual learning and insight. This requires enormous personal security, openness, and a spirit of adventure because you don't know where you're going to end up. I told you earlier about my friend Dean Curtis who did those workshops for the unemployed. He was from communications, I was from business management. We got together and created some workshops that were quite unique and that neither one of us could have done on our own. So there's different levels of communication. There's defensive communication where I try to win and you lose, or else I purposely lose and you win. Low trust, low cooperation. There's respectful communication where we compromise with a moderate amount of trust and cooperation. But what we really want is synergistic cooperation, or go for win-win. This has a high degree of trust and high cooperation. So we want to avoid negative synergy, as he pointed out in that video. Often in formal education, we are taught logic, and that's a heavy left brain function, they tell us. And if we want to be more creative, then we rely on the right brain, which is the creative or emotional side of the brain. The problem is one person may be using the left side and the other the right. What Covey says is use your whole brain. Don't go around being half-brained. How's that? So we need to value the differences that we have with other people. You should realize that if you're the leader, that a supervisor does not have supervision. You may not see things better than others, so get their input and you'll be able to accomplish more. For both persons to be right may not be logical, but it's psychological. I kind of hate that saying, but I think it's true. I remember when one of my sons had messed up, I said, what that kid needs is discipline. And my wife said, what that kid needs is a hug. Well, he needed both. We were both right. He needed discipline and a hug. So when someone sees something differently than you do, you should say, good, you see it differently. Help me see what you see. And it broadens your horizons and creativity occurs. Remember that we all come from different backgrounds. Even those who have common background do not have similar experiences. So I grew up in a family with one sister and two other brothers, but their experiences were not the same as mine because of the birth order and where we were as a family then and many other things and interests that we had. So we have different religions, family sizes, lifestyles. An increased tolerance and understanding go a long ways towards improving relationships. Okay, so talking about people who are different and overcoming those differences or maybe taking advantage of them, I'm going to tell you about an island called Mauritius. You may never have heard of it, but after seeing this video, you may actually want to go visit.
The island of Mauritius is an African nation situated 2,000 miles east of southern Africa in the Indian Ocean. In 1638, the Dutch established the first settlement on Mauritius. They later abandoned the island and the French claimed it in 1715. Slaves were imported from Africa to clear away lava rock in the fields so that sugarcane could be planted. In 1810, the British attacked Mauritius and took it from the French. Slavery was abolished and workers came from India. Muslim and Chinese merchants soon followed. In 1968, Mauritius achieved its independence and became a republic. Its population now consists of Indians, Chinese, Franco-Mauritians, Britons, and Creoles, who are descendants of white colonists and slaves from Madagascar. The dominant religions of this small island of 788 square miles are Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, and Christianity. Mauritius is overcrowded and virtually without natural resources. Its social fabric is fragile. Since 1952, the population of Mauritius has doubled to 1.2 million. Stresses upon Mauritian family life are being felt as never before. Mauritius is confronted with balancing the demands of a complex and increasingly urban society with its cultural, ethnic, and religious traditions. For centuries, Mauritius has been at the crossroads of the trade routes of the Indian Ocean. It is now at the crossroads of becoming part of the industrialized world.
Monsignor Margeau, who was the previous cardinal in Mauritius, made a very nice statement, which I think described very well. He says that we should consider each group, racial or cultural, as a fruit, an apple, a pear, a mango, and we want to make Mauritius not a marmalade where we mix up everything and grind everything and we have one marmalade with one, I don't know what taste, but we would like to have a fruit salad, where in a fruit salad, each one retains its individual flavor and taste.
We just recognize the right of everyone to be different, and that we live with these differences, and sometimes we find them to be a source of enrichment.
Do not forget that this island is the same as it was in the 16th, 17th century, far away outside the main currents of developed countries and nations, which means that for the survival of the country, you have to give the very best of yourself. And this is ingrained in us, in every Mauritian.
It's not just the work of one ethnic group or one culture. I think it's because of the mixture of different groups, different cultures, and that lead to the success, to the miracle of the country.
For quite some time, people have been talking of Mauritius as being an example of peaceful coexistence. To my mind, this is by now outdated. I believe more in terms of an active interaction between the different communities that live in this country.
I have a very Anglo-Saxon upbringing, and which I think is also very American. And we have a confrontational system in the West. Two ideas confront, they fight it out, and the best one wins. Now, what I've learned here, where the majority of the population is Asiatic, now the Asiatics have a completely different way of looking at life. Their way of looking at it is you look at what your opponent, what his position is, and you try to get as close to his position as possible.
Because there are so many different cultures and communities around, we are used to listen to the others. We have to take care of the others, their opinions, and we readily accept them. I mean, the idea is to try and get a little bit of everything and to find in an end result, a better end result than the others.
Let's look at school children, for instance. When they go to school in any village or town, they walk by the sides of someone who doesn't look like them. This is why we not only come to know each other within this country, but we know also quite well the diversified culture representing the world over.
In Mauritius, I think, after all this struggle that we have gone through, we have been able to understand that there's nothing better than understanding, helping, sharing, and giving a hand to anybody who is next to you.
I think the women who work in the sugarcane fields have preserved this tradition. For example, the Creole lady who would not hesitate at all to help the Hindu lady to complete her task. And it's something extraordinary which I love.
Our senior management is drawn from a number of the different ethnic communities in Mauritius. Now, we believe that that's a strength. The fact we do come from different backgrounds means that when a question is asked, we don't all give the same answer, and therefore you have a number of different aspects of the question.
It's formidable to see how we can rub shoulders with each other and show that sense of solidarity, which is remarkable. We know that we are all Mauritian people and that we share, whether we want it or not, we share the same fate.
If I were to wake up in the morning and one of the components of the Mauritian community had disappeared, for me it would be completely disastrous. I can't live without the Chinese, the Muslims, the Hindus, the Creoles, the Franco-Mauritians. For me, they make my humanity, and for me, I would be lame. I am lucky enough to have a congregation where I meet the great cultures of the world every day. Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and Christianism. 2,000 of my publishers are Chinese, so I use this very regularly. You see, I'm asked very often in colleges, in factories, to say masses where most of the congregation is not Christian, or Muslim and Hindus. So I call it my East and West. For me, it's a way of bringing together the East and the West. So important for our world today.
There is no religion of the world that preaches anything contrary to love, to universal brotherhood, to tolerance.
I feel, these are human values which we should preserve, which should persist. And you don't see these kinds of things in other working environments. People are becoming so egocentric.
Any community, any race, any religion is nothing, but it's what comes from your heart.
It comes from the heart, and people feel it, our guests feel it. The famous Mauritian smile that we talk about all the time, I think that's why people come back.
I think we have developed over the years the ability to look at the other with the heart. I'm just being a bit poetic, but that's how it is. We have the capacity of looking beyond physical appearance and beyond ethnic differences. We just see the man or the woman. We see the Mauritian. It takes a whole village to make a man. You can't grow up just in a small nucleus family and become somebody who can live in harmony with the society. In Mauritius, we have this village that can make the Mauritian somebody who can be in harmony with brothers, with the people around, and eventually with the world.
Mauritius is an island, and somehow we have the tendency to believe that each man is an island. But I don't look at it from the negative point of view. I believe that the island that we are in the midst of the ocean has the possibility of receiving the currents coming from all corners of the world. Like Mahatma Gandhi once said, we open the doors and the windows and allow all the currents to come in, but we try to stay on our feet.
So I hope you enjoyed that. Mauritius sounds like a really interesting place. And they've learned this already that Covey says we should do, and I say we should do. We should learn from others. It's a mistake to think that we can only learn from those who are smarter than us or have greater expertise or training. Even those with less education may teach you lessons in patience, hard work, and interpersonal skills. I have a good friend who barely finished high school, is not very literate, but he is one of the most patient, hardworking persons I've ever met. So you can learn a lot from others. Okay, this is a concept called the force field analysis that helps us understand where we are in relationships to others or our own quest. We have what we call restraining forces that want to keep us from changing, and driving forces that make us want to change. And where those meet is called equilibrium. So driving forces are usually positive, reasonable, logical, conscious, and economic. My wife says you need to lose weight. That makes sense. You'll feel better. You'll look better. It's just something you should do. And these are reasons I should change and lose weight. Restraining forces are often negative, emotional, illogical, subconscious, and social, psychological, or reasons not to change, like I really like eating that buttered popcorn while I'm watching TV. So where those two meet is called equilibrium. Performance is a state of equilibrium between the driving forces and the restraining forces. Let me give you my favorite example of this. So here I am in my hot little car again. And, when I learned to drive, my father taught me. I didn't take driver's ed in those days. But my daughters, and all my children actually, did take driver's ed. And one particular daughter named Kathy was really very dutiful about what she learned in driver's ed. So whenever we stopped the car, I would just put it in park and walk away. She would put it in park and put it on the parking brake, and I never used the parking brake. So she would wait till I got out of the car, and then she'd pull the parking brake. Or if she drove somewhere in my car, she'd put the parking brake on, and I didn't know it was on because I never put it on. So one day I got in my car and she had left the parking brake on and I didn't know it. I started the engine and I pressed on the accelerator and it didn't move. So I pressed harder and harder. Pretty soon I started smelling something burning. Well, something was wrong. I had the brake holding back the car. So should I press more on the accelerator to overcome that resistance? Or should I release the parking brake? Well, if you say, probably logically, release the parking brake, you idiot. Well, that's true, but if I don't press on the accelerator, I'm still not going anywhere. I have to do both, maybe in the correct order, release the parking brake and press on the accelerator. I need to remove the restraining forces and increase the driving forces. So you have to increase the driving forces and decrease the restraining forces. If you only increase the driving forces, the resistance becomes harder. It's like a spring. You ever tried to get a teenager to do something, and the more you try to force them, the more they resist. The more you push a spring, the harder it gets. So synergy, working together, reduces restraining forces. So that means we need to involve employees in decisions that affect them. The shove it down their throats approach to management, well, that will make us gag, because nobody likes anything shoved down their throat and even feel like we're choking from over control. If office hours are to be extended, you should involve the receptionist and the administrative assistants in this decision. Maybe they can come up with some great ideas about how to implement such a change rather than us forcing it on them. And they say, look, I got to get out of work early to pick up my kids from school. So a manager's job is not to force compliance, but to guide subordinates with concern. We often feel pressure to force your subordinates to do the job correctly or quickly. The harder you push them, the greater the resistance comes. Try rethinking of your job as one of a guide on a safari or a wilderness trek. Point out the correct road to take and the goals to be achieved, but do not try to push or force others to hurry along. I once heard a little joke about a drunk who came out of a bar and he was pulling a rope. And somebody said, "Why are you pulling that rope?" And he said, "You ever tried to push a rope?" Okay, so the point is, better to pull than to push. So let me give you a personal example of using Habit 6. I call it a date with Steve. When my wife and I got married, it's been 51 years now ago, we were given advice to always go on a date every week. And so we tried to do that. One time it was summertime and I was teaching summer classes, and I would go and teach classes and my wife would stay home. And remember, we had 7 children and they weren't in school. So it got to be quite a task for her to entertain and keep those kids engaged in something. So when I come home on Friday, she could hardly wait and we would go on a date. The kids didn't like this much because they were stuck at home too. So one day I came home from work on a Friday afternoon. There I am. There's my beautiful wife in her bridal gown. And we had 7 kids between us. It seemed like a mob. And one of them said, Daddy, we're tired of you always taking Mom out. Yeah, we have to stay home and watch reruns and eat macaroni and cheese. So take us to the movies tonight. Sounds pretty logical. But my wife says, oh, no, you don't. I've been cooped up here all week with these kids and I've had it. Your dad and I need some time alone. He's taking me to the movies. And so they started arguing and yelling at each other. Trying to make peacemaker, I asked one of Covey's key questions. Would you be willing to talk about this until we can reach a solution we all feel good about? Now, who's going to answer no to that? So the kid said, sure. My wife said, okay. So we started thinking and brainstorming, trying to come up with an idea. One of my sons says, I've got an idea. You just give me the money and I'll drive the kids to the theater while you and Mom go on a date alone. We had 2 cars. He had a driver's license. That sounded like a good solution to me. But my wife says, oh, no, you don't. My youngest is only 4 years old, and I'm afraid he'll get hit by a car in that busy parking lot at the movie theater. I know you say you'll look out for him, but I don't believe it, and I'd be worried sick. So that didn't quite work. So we brainstormed some more, and finally we came up with the solution. So here's my wife and I together, finally, leaving for our date. We say, bye, kids. They say, bye, hope you have fun on your date. So we go, we get in my hot little car, and we drive to the movie theater, and I park in a strategic location. And I say to my wife, how's this parking place, dear? And she says, it's perfect, sweetie. I can see the entire parking lot. Dear, sweetie, we're on a date trying to be romantic. But we just sat there at a strategic location predetermined. And a few minutes later, there go the kids, and Nathan's holding the young one's hand because he knows we're watching. We told them we're going to go to the parking lot, the movie theater, and we're going to sit and watch and make sure you hold his hand. So they went on, bought their tickets to the children's movie and the refreshments, went inside. Then my wife and I went in to see the romantic comedy and had a nice date. So we synergized and came up with a creative solution that was better for everyone, except my wallet. Okay, so we're going to stop at this point and come back for video 23, part 2 of Habit 6, and finish it off by viewing the Street Hawkers video.